Hey guys, good evening. It is John C. Morley here, serial entrepreneur. It's great to be with you tonight. It is Monday night. It's August 5th, and it is 2024, and it's 10:45 p.m. It's great to be with you. Thanks so much for being here with me. Whether you're with me at 10:45 p.m., 10:45 a.m., 3 a.m., 3 p.m., 6 a.m., 6 p.m., doesn't really matter. Thank you so much for being with me. I really do appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. Your master topic for the whole week is understanding why emotional intelligence is important. We've been talking about that. Tonight's granular topic is a real good one, is understanding self-regulation, one of the umbrellas under the big world of emotional intelligence and why it is important. So when we think about self-regulation, the first thing you probably want to know is what really is self-regulation? And self-regulation is a type of control. Okay, so we'll talk a little more specifically about it. But so when you think of a faucet, right? So you think about a faucet that might be self-regulating. A faucet might decide to be designed so that it can reduce the amount of water flow, so it can regulate to use less pressure. Now, also things like backup battery units. One of them is called APC. You might have heard of that before. And so what happens is when the power drops below a certain number, let's say when the power, let's say it's 150, 120, let's say it goes below, let's say anything below like 115, like maybe 110, 112, it'll have a boost kick on. Okay. So a transformer will boost the power back up to the 115, 120. If it drops below 105, then the battery will kick on. If it goes above 120, like 123, 124, then it will deregulate, it'll pull down, the transformer will pull the power back down. So that's how that works. So that's an example of regulation. And so when we think about regulation, it's something we want to talk about first, and it's pretty important. And it's called SRL. Okay, SRL. So SRL is a unique type of regulation. It's used a lot. Some people might have not heard of it, called SRL, but it stands for self-regulated learning. And it refers to a process that a student would engage in when he or she wants to take responsibility for his or her own learning and apply to the academic process the best way possible. So the process happens like this. The student plans their tasks, sets what they want to do, outlines strategies to tackle the tasks, and or creates a schedule for the task. Then they will go into monitoring. The student puts their plans into action and closely monitors their performance. And the third is reflection. So similar to what we're talking about here tonight is, the next step is monitoring, right? So in order to regulate, you have to monitor something. If something is not a certain condition, then, what do you do? Do you react, right? For example, some people might monitor temperature conditions. They might monitor health. There's lots of things you could monitor. And so I think it's important to understand, what it is, why something is a certain way. I think that's very, very important. And so this is what we mean by regulation. What we mean by monitoring. So monitoring is just keeping a close eye on something. Is it within the guidelines that we set? Is it off the guidelines we set? And so it's basically a stage where one person observes whether they are on track to the level of what their performance is expected to be. And there are lots of ways you can do that, right? So there's electronic monitoring, right? There's manual monitoring, but monitoring is a key. So when you monitor, a part of monitoring is to analyze, okay? Analyze. So analyze, if we think about analyze, and we'll go over to my good friend Merriam-Webster for the definition of analyze. Analyze, according to Merriam-Webster, first of all, it's a verb, to study or determine the nature and relationship of parts of something by analysis. So analysis is a detailed examination of anything complex in order to understand its nature or determine its essential features through study. Okay. Um, Pretty straightforward, right? Thanks to analysis. And that is all part of Merriam-Webster. So thank you very much for that. Really do appreciate that. And the last thing is to react. React might mean to adjust something. It could be like I told you how the APC, the battery system work, right? It regulated by either pushing the power up, transforming the power up, or transforming the power down, right? So that's how the reaction worked. The monitoring of that circuit is that it's monitoring to see where the flow of electricity is. And if it determines it's, let's say, outside of the one range, it says, oh, I guess I better go ahead and boost the power back up. If it falls too low, then it knows it's got to throw the battery back on, right? So that's an example of how it analyzes, and then again, it reacts. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about this, I think it's important to dive just a tiny bit deeper. And let's talk a little more about this process. So the self-regulatory model is pretty straightforward, right? But I think the real question, I think this is one that a lot of people ask me, is what's the difference between self-regulation and self-control? Well, so self-regulation and self-control. What is the difference between self-regulation and self-control? What's the difference? So I think when we think about self-regulation and we talk about self-control, there is a difference. But let me try to make this difference, easy to understand, because I think sometimes it can be a little bit confusing. So we talked a little about how self-regulation works, right? Self-regulation, and then if we talk about the difference, right? So the difference between the two. So one method basically reacts on let's say a standard, okay, and tries to prevent more of what's happening, okay? I mean, that's pretty much how that works. So self-regulation, and then we have self-control. So a self-regulation is, in one way, similar to self-control, but it's different. Basically, they deal with kind of the same process, but they're really two distinct constructs. Self-control is about preventing strong impulses. Okay, that's and self-regulation is about reducing the frequency and the intensity of the strong impulse. So let me explain this again. So self-control is about breaking strong impulses. Okay, self-regulation is reducing the frequency and the intensity of the strong impulses by managing stress loads and recovery. Self-regulation is what makes self-control possible, or in many cases, unnecessary. So again, self-control is about inhibiting strong impulses, and self-regulation is reducing the frequency and the intensity of the strong impulses by managing stress loads, etc. So when we think about self-regulation for just a moment, this is key to our success. An important part of what we talked about with the SRT is that of self-regulatory depletion. It's also called ego depletion. Very, very important to understand. And it's a state in which one's own willpower or control over self-regulations have been used up, and the energy marked for breaking the impulses has been, let's say, used up. It often results in poor decision-making and, unfortunately, performance. So when a person has been faced with many temptations, he or she must basically force an equally powerful amount of energy when it comes to controlling impulses. The SRT would state that people have a limited amount of energy for this purpose, and once it's gone, well, there's only two things that can happen. Things are blocked, the behavioral restraints are weaker, meaning that the individual has less motivation and willpower to refrain from temptations. And the second is that temptation, desires, or urges are felt more strongly than when willpower is at a normal level, a non-depleted level. So these are important things to understand. And the idea in SRT is that it explains why we struggle to avoid engaging in bad behavior. It basically happens because we get stuck. We get up on a ledge and we don't know how to get down. We've used our resources. We've used our energy. That's really, where it comes from. And that sounds like a pretty easy thing to understand, right? But then again, it might not be for a lot of people because self regulation, in its very pure sense, seems like something we can just very naturally follow, but it can confuse people. Again, when people run out of energy, they're like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do? Maybe they're trying to lose weight. Maybe they're trying to break a smoking habit or alcohol or other addiction habit, right? So it can be hard to understand. But self regulation is key to our good well being. Okay. That's really the nutshell. You have to understand that this is part of the big umbrella of emotional intelligence. And so, we have self awareness, we have self regulation, we have different skills we've talked about, right? And there's more that we're going to talk about. But I think when we start to just take apart self regulation and self control, the waters can get a little muddied. Okay. And the reason they get muddied is because you get lost into what's happening or why things are going a certain way. So I think that's probably, the most important thing. And I'll tell you that it comes down to the fact that it's about people. It's about knowing what makes us do something. I will tell you something else, ladies and gentlemen. It's interesting to know that everyone has these abilities. And so you might be saying, gee, how does that even happen? Well, it happens because people go one way, but then they don't realize what really is happening. Okay. They don't realize what really is happening. And the reason they don't realize what's really happening is because suddenly they just don't understand. Okay. And by not understanding, they cause themselves to be depleted. Okay. I think people lose energy. Okay. They lose energy. I think it comes down to the fact that people oftentimes change their mood because of the way they're feeling at the current time. Okay. How they're feeling at the current time. Does that mean you can change that? Sure, you can. But we have to decide what it is we really want. If we don't know what we want, how can we ever get better? I think that's the bottom line. Ladies and gentlemen, I am John C. Morley, serial entrepreneur. It has been an amazing privilege, pleasure, and honor to be with you this fantastic evening. I hope you'll like, love, and support the channel. Comment below, tag your friends, colleagues, and associates. Share this out with everyone you know on social media. Sure, don't forget, of course, to follow me on TikTok and all the great media. We're coming very close to one of our milestones. Once we reach that milestone, we're going to have a cake and we're going to have 100 candles, and we're going to go to try to blow those candles out for you live on camera on the John C. Morley Serial Entrepreneur YouTube channel, which this is actually a part of. You can check out more of my great curations at believemeachieve.com. And there's lots of stuff there. Daily videos, Super Motivational Friday. There's JCM Academy on Monday. There's some science stuff. There's a lot. So check it out. I think you will find that it will definitely enhance and improve your life. So have yourself a fantastic rest of your evening. Take care, everyone, and be well.